avoid yes, reported utility for aid intervention, usually because to objectively clear what outcome that is better. However, it is already predefined the criteria posed one of those vertices and the recipients may yes, A, the producer utility determination, what response level of giving is required dependent on the particular representation of the target, which involves reductions and aggregations of subjectivity of the other, needs to always determine ethical importance of the other, which resists and neutral remains. The fiction that of the value that can be determined, our position towards the other is the only rated for productive ethics. O'Halloran. 14, we do not live in isolation with the other. Subjectivity must be understood in relation to the other. You might see yourself as well because you have better jobs different from the other previous self-minded attempt to separate ourselves from the others. Impossible ethics should be found in the hospitality. Hospitality is not conditional. It is impossible. The self must be in a position to give a poor embrace attention. A basis for productive ethics. Note the self and the other. This is the optimum starting point of the self. That is something that sees as valuable. When we encounter the self, other positive transformation, self starting point, absolute hospitality. That ensures something unpredictable, positive change throughout the engagement with the other. The logic of the worst violence causes genocide and nuclear war by constantly justifying them as the lesser of two evils, crafting artificial risks to silent ethical action. Oliver. 20. Within this util calculus of risk-benefit analysis, refugees are placed in the numbers that plug into equation access the benefits of this, helping them refugees become disposable and so far as they change for others. Refugees become collateral damage to util that transform the world humanitarian machine. These rules are based on proportionality risk-benefit analysis within the collateral damage to suffering with now by for suffering probably the calculation and arbitrary controls of death, the impossibility predicted of usual risk. That is the calculation and illusion of mastery that is presented the worst violence of the lesser two evils. This view of collateral from terror set that of greater precision of source the method to calculate even so. Within the logic is supposedly avoid the worst. Yes, the incalculable within the equation gives an alibi the rechangeability of the word on terror. This suggests that not any machines of the worst violence, so then we avoided the worst is then associated with genocide, then mentioning the worst violence hierarchical evaluation of what the violence is the sovereignty and any other potential threat of response to genocidal logic that of enemies or rejected resembles the absolute threat of nuclear war, the models of reduced life, and then for the genocidal logic, the worst and the lesser of two evils, life and death, is reduced to calculation logic proportionality to mitigate death, then the worst and the lesser of two evils, ask yourself what the evil associated with nuclear war destruction, the entire planet with lives becoming changed when we have the entirely possible condition of what is better for worse, therefore the incalculable determine what is calculated now, and no common measure of persuading and personal warning that let's grave the nuclear war must be seen as the result of the utility pollution or genocidal logic, statistical models, go with evaluation of the part of genocidal logic justify the worst. We can never know every consequence of our decision to be hospitable, but instead of forfeiting existential anxieties to exclude the other, prioritize experiencing the impossible. Marcus, 17, hospitality, state of undecidability, aporia, that is impossible to know what is outside the door. Hospitality is always an undecidability, state of peculiar existential anxiety. Hospitality is conscious act of prohibitivity. Nothing is sure forever. There's nothing planetonic, there's one uncertainty, transcendental, good infinity of myself, and the other is diverse faces on time, like the conditional placeables of the other, the impossibility, yet the possibility of the other. It's not a chaos. It's not a theory of chaos to understand the globalization of state law being useless on the other people. The impossible is made possible through both the experience and negation of impossibility. It's okay. The 11 tumors of the project of the project is possible to fail. Besides the definition of hosts that say no to the force, and then including women without any consideration of singular unconditional hospitality states out of the loss of hospitality and poor. A common conception of all these issues, social hospitality, not of any satisfaction that imply the real possibility of ethics. Market ethics.
Last one?
Yep.
Okay. You good?
Yep.
Wait, is the platex in?
No.
Okay, top that first.
Sure. So.
We're writing into
Sure. We're losing the war right now, so having the table.
Brandon, we good?
Yep.
If we prove the plan is a bad idea, do we win?
Yeah, if the plan is bad,
Okay. Is there any reason to vote out besides the desirability of the plan?
you vote out, the plan is a good idea.
Okay.
The way we
What does it
determine
mean
that
to
idea-
maximize hospitality?
What?
Would it be maximizing hospitality to let everyone on Earth die?
What? Okay,
That's a
so the idea,
consequence, yeah.
so letting everyone Earth on die does not deconstruct the binary between the self and the other, so that's not hospitality. Our argument is
what
that
is the
ethics,
self and the other, and
Yeah.
why is that true?
So our argument is that ethics are relational. Our O'Halloran evidence explains it pretty simply. It explains that the way we relate to other people, the way we have relationships, can only be defined
Okay.
within this binary.
Why is it
So
good
our
to
argument
adopt this
is
view of
that-
ethics?
Huh?
Why is it good to adopt this view of ethics?
Yeah, because we are relational ethics explains all ethics and is able to determine
Why is that
and
true?
explain. What?
Why is that true?
I
Why is it
can't-
good
I
to
can't-
assume that?
Yeah, so like let me talk and
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
explain. So, and our argument is that the hierarchies between the self and the other characterize unethical action and bad things, and we have to deconstruct that hierarchy by putting the self below the other and to engage in ethical action. So the thing, like, let me give a more concrete example. Do you
So,
want-
you think the root of all things is that we think other people are less important than ourselves?
Huh?
You think the root of all bad
I would
actions?
take issue with people because the self binary between the self and the other is just a way of relating with people, not with people, but with other like with the other, right? You can't
What's the
define
other if not another person?
Huh?
What's the other if not another person?
The other is a concept that we can relate to in the context of the app. It's undocumented migrants. So it can't be
Undocumented
people. The other can include people,
Okay.
but our O'Halloran evidence explains that the other can be the self as well, because you can compare yourself to a previous version of yourself, and then compare that to your current self, and then create a hierarchy there. And that also shows that the binary between the self and the other is the way we conceptualize how we are as actors.
So if the win condition, let's say we adopt this view of ethics, the negative must prove that the app is less hospitable to undocumented migrants.
Sure. Well, yeah.
You have to prove the plan is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Which the reason the plan is a good idea is because it's unconditionally hospitable to undocumented immigrants.
Yes.
So, yes.
Why is it unconditionally hospitable? Why doesn't it include other things like abolishing ICE itself? How's it hospitable?
Well, that's like not a good way to determine if something's a good idea or not. If
No,
something's a good
but
idea,
you said
it's a
the
good
app must
idea.
be unconditionally.
Yeah. Okay. So I can actually.
There's a
make this
condition
one.
on
Okay.
hospitality
So okay.
against.
So the idea of the aporia in Derrida is like unconditional
Okay,
hospitality
then.
itself is impossible, but the act of striving for unconditional hospitality is itself good and generative more hospitable relations with the other.
And our O'Halloran evidence
Oh,
explains
wait,
that
if the
the
negative
aporia-
proves something is more hospitable, like has a better relation to unconditional hospitality, then you win.
like,
If you have
okay.
something that's more hospitable, like, yeah.
Okay. 10 minutes.
Actually, I think I'm good.
You're good? Oh, 9:57.
Okay. Sending the doc now. It's gonna be wait. Oh boy. 11 on case.
Sorry, you said what?
11 off on case.
Okay.
Let me plug in. One second. I just gotta.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyone not good?
It's open.
Cool. Anyone not good? Bet.
First Officer Rachel All, I cannot upload the United States Federal Office of Spray Peace Protection, Domestic Intellectual Property Rights, and Copyright and Modified Fair Use to preclude facial surveillance for allowed valuation by an expedited racial audit team. The United States Federal ought to preclude the change of fair use without the audit theory and potential racial bias. The players a chance to apply this matter for unconditional hospitality, which the counterplan would uncover. In addition, conditionality can be good in the case of racism. Race audits solve ineffective discrimination. Prior embodied is key. Body 16. Discrimination creates indefinite continuous responsibility. Polluted law is a barrier limits relative regions through time and flexibility of race audits and identifying local practice to perpetuate inequality. Recommendations for roads policy to be evaluated. Monitoring reviews the solution. Not only crucial. The counterplan improves the app and avoids it. Dr. 2K, venture policy, race is more likely to affect policy making deliberations, conscious racial policy making racial impact, racial disparity, effects of race, immigration, and policy analysis for understanding racial impacts, neutrality, solution for race analysis. This is a critical opportunity. Next up is Hong Kong counterplan. The United States to a limited self-executing analysis of the dimension call for at least 84 the states around 5 at least 38 states striking protection of domestic and intellectual property rights, copyright and modifying fair use to include facial surveillance. It solves with politics and is good to debate for all 16. You know, constitution make it fair to meet constitution right there and attain ideals for it is Article 5 of constitutional amendment and substantial substantial change debate all such as despite allegiance of IPA constitutional academic commentary failed to examine systemic and theoretical terms provisions very significant way has a profound effect on behavior. Next up is the ITC. Counterplan the United States International Trade Commission should establish region and intellectual property protections that facial surveillance and prejudice upon the United States government should remove relevant and redundant protections on intellectual property rights. It solves and avoids litigation independently and bolsters ITC legitimacy. Document 25. U.S. Sweden protection of protection of property issued to the protection catalyst for introducing U.S. registration litigation. The ITC should enforce helps strengthen the ITC international university not being limited the same way patent cases of innovation enables effective crackdowns on wildlife trafficking. Both her and Jackson 13. ITC is like any culture worldwide campaign investigation nationally environment are very powerful and nation unlawful to import prohibited wildlife species linked to apparently U.S. member legal wildlife and government against the accident or litigate the ITC extends beyond infringement and reaches objectionable practice in the ITC that destroys global biodiversity extinction. It is definitely unconditional, not conditionally hospitable to animals. Portugal 8. Illegal wildlife is very big since devouring its living resources drive the entire species extinction issue of human survival value because of influence air water and medicinal destruction to practice that are very existence. You want me to read the
Fine.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay, next off is USFG. Topical forces can only claim advantages based on immediate hypothetical enactment of a topical plan by the USFG. Winning that the USFG should not do the plan should always be sufficient reason to vote negative. Result is legislative departure 1. American heritage result. A determination decision would also usually emphasize the fact that the policy may result in adoption of resolution by legislative body should require pending federal government action. Unit 9. The administrative use express obligation of agency authority. Congressional determined favor and judges and who says the word cannot be misinterpreted. Of course, also valid wording. It be obligation, not discretion. Read this entire thing.
No.
Yeah, the voting should be limiting ground. There's infinite unpredictable representational advantages and negative should never be expected to negate. And yeah, if they're extra T, that's still a voting issue because it links to all our predictability stuff. Next is the unilateral set. The United States government should ban tariffs unless justified by special 301 report, comply with the amendment, prohibit strengthening protections of international partners domestically, weakening its IP rights to match the minimum standards proposed by TRIPS, unilaterally increasing U.S. IP protections, offsets international IPR harmony, that encourages special 301 use, big government ITU, give protection to U.S. IPR, special 301, retaliatory by government against adequate protection to U.S. IP provides USCR, and investigations for remedies, section 301, committed scope, abroad, requires U.S. identifying countries that deny fair discrimination, ranges, trade and regulation, of the same effects, USA, national and proud, U.S. and India trade, relations, tariff protection, to be worked in a country that operates in APs, that really present trading partners, occasionally, something announced by which would be an expensive U.S. locating special 301, special 301 breaks international trade regulation, green lighting protection, SM Child 19, special 301, U.S. IP, and the Chinese division of tariff, as opposed to the equivalent long controversial lands again, info from the WTO violates legal options, special 301 does not go through any after only complaint on both compliance reasons, distortion made by any measure, all not any measure can influence independently, special 301, trade wars cause extinction and are conditionally hospitable because we're not doing free trade. Stocking 24, shifting order and stability, disorder, multi nuclear war replaced by natural and fragile geological, especially into energy security, from the nuclear security, natural collapse, use of orders, being crucial weapons, struggle between global position, equal protection, the global order, the license to Europe, and at least isolation of potential global climate change, proliferation, march of all the U.S. escape the war. With the WTO, the United States should pass the FY 2025 budget reconciliation bill, prohibit passage of the FY 2025 budget reconciliation bill, mid the $1 trillion coin, issue premium bonds, raise the debt ceiling, independent budget reconciliation, strengthen its protection, domestic and intellectual property rights, and copyright, modifying fair use of fluid facial surveillance in 5 months. The $1 trillion crime premium bonds and independent passage solve default reconciliation will pass the PCC further. 421 about with the ratio to the majority of possible population surveillance and unguarded readiness, for instance, delivering inclusive testing and centralization of power to reconciliation for checking reconciliation versus a lot of more host and meetings and applies pressure on the relationship with the day as the vote was unfolding. The plan is a political firestorm for terminus of 23 policymakers of water for arguing for your national right many come out of the endless of who see IPs for corporate energy we then we IPs will be agenda and other regional goals. Debt ceiling is the only upside of hazard. Default collapse readiness that goes nuclear chaos 23. The Department of the DOD's budget and ability to counter global instability to place regions as the division of weakens strategic dominance, China can take advantage of cyber and space leaving infrastructure vulnerable undercut the idea molding in China or Russia to increase threats. Next up is the ban counterplan. The United States should ban AI, substantially increase regulations on AI, ban dark energy, invest in infinite pleasure simulations for humans and animals, and launch a nuclear force strike against China and Russia. Then next off is the states counterplan. The 50 states should prohibit all facial recognition surveillance technology, especially against immigrants, and decline to cooperate with ICE. Next off is the criminal liability pick. The United States ought to strengthen its protection of domestic and cooperate and copyright by modifying fair use of facial surveillance, excluding criminal liability. The is also limiting applying civil liability for emergent lose 15. You should on criminal enforcement by here indicates extraordinary but unexpected conflict, extremely high cost for power companies, large corporates. The biggest market share in the U.S. relies on victims of top companies are aggressively directing APR, U.S. cultivating good relations officials, enforcement officers, corporations, lose peace, also and then effective reinforcement clientelism, unequal treatment capture, enforcement, judges, and unfairly capture. In the U.S. factors not only the overall enforcement, but also for priorities that energy mobility capacity, make fundamental change, unreasonable military change, lower enforcing equality, industrial health, more knowledge, and of hyper-protection, membership, of civil forces, with their goal to streamline use of money, having social economy, needs of businesses, institutions, right for cost overextension of criminal enforcement justice free speech, but on 23, no laws enforcement of reasons controversies, there's not payment of excess video, civilization, sufficient for negative use of hesitation on effective freedom of speech, more ability to reach out about the appropriate extinction, and then commercial knowledge, special conclusion about the non economic importance of the trying to stay, not the mental health organization as we tackle the extinction of racism, the urgency of getting good information. Next off is the legal formalism. KIPR is rooted in a rigid translation of economic science and a formulaic rules that ingrained commitment to legal formalism, and use of formalism and legal analysis, translate legal language and rules. Also, which numerous ontological subject differences. It's like the consistent way the rules of the law operation in U.S. law. It does analysis of spaces misleading, drawing heavily on economic theories of harvest, living formalization, that classic theory related to industry, rational behavior formal, then how the traditional formalization technology preventing categorizations or formalizing using inclusive specific real rules in case all the formalization of legal justice of crime, pure formalization of their criteria that result in which generation like being taken into account that makes societal and ecological collapse inevitable, and for legal realism, endorsing positive measures in economic reorganization. Okay, 24, rapid innovation and shifts outpace the farmers leading to societal harm that should be sustainable and understand environmental social issues like climate and usually legal framework of shaping the landscape of the rules of the law should be rules design and involving teaching the laws that were set up rules and consolidation facility rather than hinder innovation and laws of fundamental rights as the rights there is the data that makes it idea the laws are keepers and enable ethical strategies or emerging technology and evidence on the boxing industry and law rights equal incentive boundaries and not only applied but also ethically sound. They have made the argument that we should forefront the legal philosophy of the 1AC4, so I don't need to make that argument. I read the next one. Okay, next is the case. Our scenarios aren't low probability, which avoids their critiques, can't be calculated as not assume qualitative and quantitative evidence. We've read the debate about their proposals, extra versus outweigh over 20. Then to eliminate all of us in the very orders, human interview, agricultural state future, but it doesn't be represented all more than the way back, leave the actual vacant, versus the later, there's your evidence, probably the stress of the middle and pressure, the green, low, current light, for past evidence of the lens, and life from the be the world's top priority there. Every other ethical system regresses into consequentialism because you need to necessarily evaluate the consequences in order to determine if it's unconditionally hospitable in the first place, because intent should not matter if you intended to help but ended up deporting every single immigrant in the United States. The app cannot solve authorization. They only have one internal link to it, which we disputed, and it links turned to no theory of ethics and a selfish circumvents it. The RSRE 22, University of Baker,
Mark this and read the
Conservative Societies. Mark the card at Societies.
read it off.
Okay, back up. Next off is the Borders Contemplating Anti-Discrimination. Open American border substantially reduce border control and abolish ICE. Institute universal health care for all programs through single payer selves. Health justice, way to issue single payer. This is a program of health qualification, optional health insurance, permanent and universal health insurance. These programs remain constitutional single payer. Address health disparities in health insurance, future quote, black people, for all brand. Universal health insurance resemble approximately single payer, smart different races, higher social care, single payer, relates groundwork for solidarity to default utilitarianism, especially on this topic, chapter 23. Okay, right. Forefront the legal philosophy of the 1AC. Dominus 25 theories about inability and effort to reform our treaty structure. Secondary. Last, as a substantial education, legal force effort, the center. The level of starting point, reform is critical for individual no longer the law and actors. Reaching a different form of actors, thinking for the reflection of reality of the form. Introducing those laws and qualifies other will often produce subforms. Card is subforms. No, it's the last card on legal formalism.
Yeah. Legal formalism.
Yeah.
Do you want that for legal formalism?
Yeah, legal formalism. Sorry about that.
Good, Brendan.
Yep.
Okay. If you win, the counterplan solves the case. Do you win?
Well, it would have to have a net benefit,
Why?
because the counterplan should probably be preferable to the case, and also the perm would then probably solve it, which isn't very good for
What is it? Why is it good for something to be preferable to unconditional hospitality?
Well, we think the way the debate should work is the neg should win if they disprove the desirability we want to see. We think in order for a counterplan to disprove the
So to be clear, the
desirability
counterplan only wins if you win a net benefit.
I mean, to be honest, this is an argument you would be making.
Yeah.
Like, out of,
I mean, I'm making-
honestly, if it solves better, maybe, like if you forgot to permit or something.
Okay. I want to go to case. So you said your scenarios are high probability. You're citing qualitative and quantitative evidence. Let's
Yeah.
go through some of this quantitative. So politics.
Yeah.
First, uniqueness card. Any qualitative or quantitative evidence for will pass.
Wait, let me get to the.
You got the gravitational force. That's G.
True.
So your quantitative and qualitative evidence
Yeah,
is
and
It
President
explicitly
Trump is now
compares
the
it to a
gravitational.
universally quantitative force of gravity, a
Brandon,
universal law
Brandon.
of attraction.
If
That's the
someone
point why
if
we need
someone
this argument.
is if someone is a gravitational force for shaping a bill, that
Yeah.
doesn't mean will pass, right?
We think it will pass now. We
And
think
you
that's a
have no-
pretty
so,
descriptive argument.
Yeah, you have no evidence.
And at worst, it's qualitative because it's describing
okay,
qualitatively
yeah,
what's
qualitative for
happening
what
in
though?
this.
Like qualitative
For
to
it
say
will
he's
pass.
a force in shaping the bill.
Yeah, for it will
Read
pass.
sorry, read a line for
He's
will.
adding 10.
Read a line for will pass.
Read a line for will pass?
Yeah.
I got you, bro. I got you. Wait, I still need to find the dissent. It's wait.
You don't need
Here it
to
is,
find
here it is, here it is, here it is. They're embarking on a quote breakneck legislative sprint to deliver.
To-
Yeah.
to deliver
centralization-
to deliver the package.
quote,
Okay,
centralization
I'll
of
actually
power
read the
is
last
an
line that
example.
you highlighted. There was uncertainty whether Republican leadership would win the day
That
as the
was
vote was
big four.
unfolding.
Yeah, and it did. Like what?
Okay,
It's
on-
saying
no,
that, it's
on the
saying
House
that they can
floor.
still stop it. It's saying
No,
you
no.
this doesn't overwhelm.
Yeah, okay, but you haven't made a will pass argument, so it's just a won't pass.
This is definitely a will pass.
Okay,
however.
status
Same
of,
PC succeeds.
status of the opposite position.
Status quo is always a logical option.
Why?
We think it's probably, out of many reasons, it's probably the most fair for the negative if we can have conditional advocacies.
So why is conditionally affirming unconditional hospitality good?
What is that? What do you mean by that?
You said your
You're asking why it
advocacies are
solves?
you said your advocacies are conditional, right?
Yeah.
Why is conditionally affirming unconditional
I
hospitality?
think this
good?
probably goes back to the topicality argument. I think the way that we proposed it doesn't
You
necessarily
have to
matter.
meet
No,
topicality to win your
Russell,
counterpoint.
Russell. If we go for it, it's not conditional anymore. It's like
No,
it's
because you're introducing it conditional.
Well, if we say judge kick, then
Okay, yeah, topicality, what's the violation?
Your argument seems to be that the app should have a self deficit based on something that's not the consequence of the plan. We don't think you should get that.
Why is unconditional hospitality not the plan?
Because you made an argument about the way we presented it in the 1 and C being able to be a
How?
self
Like-
We don't think that can be.
Like-
You just asked a question which implies
Yeah,
that
I
we
mean,
will
I asked,
generate
like, why is
self-deficits.
unconditional hospitality not the ethic of the plan?
Because the counterplan itself is not conditionally hospitable.
The
It would
counterplan's
fiat
not
the plan.
unconditionally hospitable?
It would fiat the plan. Conditionality in debate is a
Okay, so
completely
they
separate
fiat the
thing.
plan now?
Well, no, it's competitive, but it's solvent for the plan.
10 minutes. give an order in a second. Give a second. The order will be case, T, what do we want to call the K?
Let's call it legal formalism.
Legal formalism K?
Strong man.
The criminal liabilities counterclaim, the ITC counterclaim, the racial audits counterclaim, the advantage counterclaim, like the single payer one. Then it's going to be like the wipeout counterclaim, states counterclaim, con, unilateral declarations DA,
Not declaration.
or
It's just unilateral, right?
Just you want.
unilat DA. Sorry, and then the politics DA. Do we need that again?
Yes.
Yeah, one to check that, right?
Framework or T, the legal formalism K, criminal liabilities, ITC counterclaim, racial audits, advantage counterclaim, wipeout counterclaim, states counterclaim, con counterclaim, unilat DA, politics DA.
Flows are in order, but let me get the docs.
Changes.
Affirm unconditional hospitality by stopping facial surveillance to undocumented migrants that deconstructs the notion of the home by preventing exclusion of the other from the nation state. The role of the judge is to maximize hospitality, configures all relationality between the self and the other. You should orient your decision calculus through the lens of unconditional hospitality as a meta-ethic. That's Murray Musoke and O'Halloran. Ethics are a prior question. The way we conceptualize policy impacts how our ethical subjectivities cause those relations in the first place. Or it is racist. In the book they cite is riddled with eugenics. Reject the team for making this space violent and unsafe towards for 3. Or to appeal on a Harris's podcast of Harris promoted Charles Moraine made racist remarks that eugenics become normalized as to order the perspective of the task remaining to fulfill potential. He's clear that it will involve the transhumanist approach. Transhumanism involved the most prominent eugenicists using almost the exact same words as where transhumanism is liberal eugenics. 1 and 2 is that everything else regresses into consequentialism. This is wrong since they conceded our theory of power. Our role is the only non-arbitrary one in debate. If we're right about the binary of the other, then the hospitality is the only response that governs all relationality. That's Bradby and O'Halloran. They have asserted that the role of the judge is arbitrary and devolves into consequentialism. Ethics outweigh it because the binary between the self and the other is a prerequisite to understanding consequentialism in the first place. Their theory cannot understand why we think things like necrophilia are bad, why surveillance by NSA is bad, but only our theory can account for those things in the first place. They say we cannot solve every instance of otherization. That's correct. That's the concept of Derrida's aporia. Unconditional hospitality is impossible, but it's nonetheless necessary because it creates a starting point to interrupt the politics of the self, to attempt to create and have a productive ethic in the first place. That's O'Halloran. The framing of the proper, the calculation of the worst balance functions within the logic of the lesser of evils that operates in the genocidal logic because there will always be a worse balance to sideline the other. That's all of it. It's a root cause of extinction because there will always be a worse balance that can happen, and the drive to the other, to eliminate the other, eventually causes their framing also erases the other because it imposes an objective declaration of what the other needs. That denies the other of their ethical subjectivity because it attempts to know what is valuable to the other. In the context of social aid, that's Andrade. If they do, when they're framing, elevate to the other subjectivity to that of nuclear war because of their line drawing operates to a genocidal logic. That's Taylor. Embrace risk framing because it's foundational to the political project of unconditional hospitality. Being unconditional in the chance of the home being disrupted makes our hospitality unconditional in the first place. That's Taylor. They say there's the rest of the cards were marked before any warrants, and all of the 2 1 and C's chirps about extinction turning hospitality is wrong because those do not deconstruct the binaries between the self and the other, which means those are not hospitality. Those are just reasons why it's good for the other. But our argument is that we need to forefront unconditional hospitality because that addresses the root cause of all unethical action. T. One way we will defend the plan is the only reason to vote AF, but our ethics are tied to its implementation. The way we discuss policy issues and propose solutions directly affects the policies we implement. Even if it doesn't, you should elevate to that scale because that ensures we're most ethical. 2, no offense. All the reasons to vote AF are tied to the plan's implementation. They should be able to have justifications for introducing arguments in their debate space. Their logic justifies voting on racism good, and so far as its consequences are good. 3, it's unpredictable. Their evidence does not say the way we talk about things should be excluded, just that we should have discussion about hypothetical instances of the resolution, which we are doing. Our argument
is that the way we talk about these things is interlinked with the plan's implementation. And 4 is that we're not extra T. We'll only go for the plan being a good idea, but the way we determine the plan and those consequences can be influenced by other things. The legal formalism can. 1, legal formalism does not explain aggression toward the other. Hospitality configures humanity as a structure, especially in the context of migration policies. 2, where the one he sees stands toward the other. You cannot divorce the ethics of the plan from its consequences, otherwise you're denying the agency of the other by conditionally evaluating their circumstances. Their also moves to our app and turns defense into offense. Fairness would outweigh 3, perm to both. The all overwhelms the links or it can't solve. They've also conceded 1 C. Taylor, which says that the notion of the nation state is critical to the project of unconditional hospitality because it deconstructs the notion of the home, which is a prerequisite to their offense. 4, perm to the app through the lens of the Emporio. 5, growth sustainable. Right. 20, making sure we're wrong. Peak world population by mental renown not happen. Attacking capitalism, subvert shortages, price maximum, allocate resources the most value. Win prices to grow more and find more and better use the economy grow. The consumption is decreasing. 7, perm to the plan and forefront capital forefront legal policies. And every other instance, the app is a one instance where it's good and we have to use the state against itself. 8, also without text or voting issue incentivizes night shifting and stacking, F-ground and clash. Criminal liabilities. 1, no internal single instance of the counterplus process doesn't institute a broad regime of governance, and it's not unique. It's already high in the quo, and there's no impact apocalyptic framing of environmental crisis, and visualizes ongoing fellow who 15 planetary carbon amplification, prevents a spectacular trauma of extinction, where living in the future, vacation, carbon to score country, racial pain, smell, yellow, pearl, obscure, U.S. responsibility, subtle balance informed by exploding, position shifting cells of interface, the universe, side risk of human cell, disputes, the ultimate atmosphere, parasite the human colonies, ecology's time and thought itself, the effects of waste may kill, the circumstances play of soul violence unintentional, ecocide market, ecocide 2 can't solve. The counterplan operates through the lens of conditional hospitality only. It excludes people and gives the USFG the authority to decide the hospitality and passage of the plan. 3, permanent build, solves the 4 permanent plan in the counterplan over other issues. Russell was not tax, counterplan, especially textually, and forcibly competitive execute after ground and objectivity. 6, perm, adopt the plan by the counterplan's policy formulation. Russell, that's just the counterplan text, and then the plan text. 8, do the counterplan, then the AF. Our interprets that we get specified sequence, but not time for should the future. Brown 8, should look to the future, considering possible future events. The ITC counterplan. 1, no internal, no spillable single instance of the counterplan's process doesn't ensue a broad regime of governance. B, non-unique. ITC is high in the status quo, and C, the border disputes is exactly what we're critiquing because it's a question of the securitization of the border. 2 can't solve, the ITC can't solve this question. For ICE can do sweet is perfectly possible, ineffective. However, 24, customized IPR of fits refilling to deliver benefit proposals difficult to accomplish. Close to breakdown methodologies, the ways are challenging to foresee, enable rent seeking, risk of capture. My district fair system produce little incentive to innovate, and this counterplan is a logic of separate but equal because we need to create a sui generis system to create a separate system for undocumented migrants, which means that it inevitably fails because it still otherwise has migrants. 3, permanent votes on internal. 4, permanent the plan and the counterplan over other issues. 5, permanent the counterplan. 6, adopt the plan by the counterplan's policy formulation. 7, permanent the counterplan. Then the F, racial audits. 1, no internal and no submittal over a single instance of the counterplan's process doesn't institute a regime of governance. B, not unique, it's high in the status quo. 2, can't solve the cross-flight deficits from above, and also say no. 3, the change could be done for the name and making the system work through ultimate costs are hard to predict, any decent detection of predicate grounds and not being reduced, and the people who are decided on the panel will be conditionally hospitals toward migrants, meaning it fails. 3, perm growth solves the internal. 4, perm the plan and the counterplan over issues. 5, do the counterplan. 6, adopt the plan by the counterplan's policy formulation. 7, perm to the counterplan. Then the F, advantage counterplan. 1, permanent vote. 2, permanent counterplan. 3, permanent plan in any combo of the planks. 4, links that benefit single players politically unpopular. There's a wariness DA. The DA means the counterplan can't solve. The ethics of the counterplan are premised on avoiding a DA that places a condition on unconditional hospitality, which must be unconditional in the first place. The white pack counterplan. Perm to both, perm to any combo of the planks. 1, states. 1, perm to both. 2, permanent counterplan. 3, it gets preempted because immigration policy is exclusively a federal jurisdiction. 1, do the counterplan. 2, counterplans only can fiat USFG action. That's best because the con counterplans are better because they are not real world and obliterate certainty. 4, perm to both perceived as follow-on. 5, the convention is existential, which sparks a nuclear war, which is their impact. And there's also a gamer DA. The counterplans all attempt to avoid that benefit, which is in and of itself a condition, which means they cannot access unconditional hospitality. You don't let perm to both, perm to the F, and any combo of the planks. It's not unique. Bush 25, USC held hearings, challenges, IPRs abroad, hearings for part of special 301 for the report has the Israeli countries that don't feel the correct. American IP provides audits for trade partners. The plan changes no enforcement of international statutes. It's wholly a question of domestic action. The thumpers await COVID every IP loss in 72. Perm to both, perm to the F, and any combo of the planks, perm to the counterplan, links that benefit 10 trillion coins. Is politically unpopular. There's a convictions DA asserting we shouldn't extend hospitality and should force another actor to do it for us. If you would avoid an arbitrary net benefit, it's bad. There's always another actor to do the F. Tax cuts for the wealthy is bad. Military 9. No social good sales for the elephant million illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, which has been brought up on tax cuts for the rich. I can give us deciding what to do. Now terrorists directed toward what we believe will happen in the future. Mark Ed Future and the DA won't pass Administration 421. Typically, if the House and Senate agree that the non-House and pushing structural cuts, the Senate have not their one House one they'll take the lead, big fight over how much they need cuts. Their ability of difference to negotiate the House at 1.5 trillion in cuts that couldn't get that without touching Medicaid. I'm good for crossings.
Yeah.
Mark it.
Cool. Wait, did you mark the middle part?
Yeah.
What was it at?
And future.
Well, terror is directed towards what?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Good for cross.
Yeah.
Theory arguments.
Conditionality, and then also death terms.
Cool. Got it. I guess let's go to topicality. Under your counterinterpretation, if the USFG implementing the plan is not solvent for offense, can you win the debate?
No.
Okay, cool. That makes sense. Yeah. All right, sure.
But if we win that your representations cause the DAs to fail, then that means that, your representations in this round and the way you've depicted that is offense for us.
Why would our representations implement how a disadvantage operates?
Yeah, because those logics are the root cause of your impact, of the reason why we need more the tax cuts, and it's the self-perpetuating logic that
How does
eventually
what we
causes your
say in
impact.
this debate influence how it would occur?
Well, it's a question of the logics and ethics. Our argument is that your ethic and the way that these DAs operate, the ethic by which they operate, is unethical and eventually causes their
Unethical. Okay. Can you win if the plan isn't a good idea, but the disads were unethical?
well, DAs prove the plan is a bad idea. So.
Okay, cool. I guess let's go to case. What is hospitality?
Hospitality is the unconditional rendering of the self for the other.
What does it mean to render the self?
To place the self below the other and accept the other into their own.
How do two people be unconditionally hospitable to each other if you put one below the other?
Well, so
Wouldn't
that's
that just be like infinite?
yeah. So
side
that's
bottom?
yeah. You're right. That's Derrida's argument of the aporia, and Derrida addresses this by saying that from that starting point, we must embrace unconditional hospitality because that's the only starting point for nothing.
Okay. Alright, sure. I guess starting point, does that rely on winning the plan would result in future policies or changes to how the government operates?
What is that?
For the app to be a starting point for unconditional hospitality, do you have to win that there's kind of a spillover in policy?
No, we just have to win the plan is unconditionally hospitable.
Okay, then what is it a starting point for if it doesn't result in this?
I think I'm a little bit confused by your question. So our argument is that unconditional hospitality is the ethic that should guide this debate and everything. If the plan is unconditionally hospitable, and it's the most hospitable option in the debate,
Most
and judges vote out.
hospitable option. Sure, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I guess the critique, your framework argument was that you can't divorce the plan from its justifications, right?
You can't divorce ethics from consequences.
Ethics from consequences. How does that implicate how the debate should be evaluated?
Well, it means that you cannot divorce our ethic of unconditional hospitality from the consequences of the plan. The two are intertwined.
The two are intertwined. Okay, cool. I guess when you made the argument about how, things besides the consequences of the one I see should be evaluated, is there any border for that, 2 AC arguments, etc.?
What?
Okay, cool. We'll take like a
Yeah, I'm actually on the it's for about to depart for the
It's a long word. New sheet.
That's gonna take a second.
The racial audit counterplan. New sheet. And then the racial audit counterplan. The NEPA counterplan. The criminal liability counterplan.
Wait, what was before criminal liability? Sorry.
NEPA.
NEPA. What was NEPA?
The first.
The audit?
Let me double
Wait,
check.
did we read NEPA?
I'm pretty sure it's like
What am I missing?
No, never mind. Sorry.
Feel
no.
free to extend it.
No, criminal liability. Just ignore NEPA.
Okay.
I forgot we replaced it.
Okay.
that was,
Okay.
I was like, I didn't know that was what that was called.
Yeah.
I got a little
Okay.
Me too.
The ITC counterplan. And then the states counterplan. The Unilat DA. The advantage counterplan. Like the open borders counterplan.
The non.
No, the non-whiteout one. Politics. Con. Case.
What's up? Let me.
Okay. New sheet. Audit.
Audit.
Criminal.
Yeah.
ITC.
Yeah.
States.
Yeah.
Unilat.
Yeah.
Advantage counterplan.
Yeah.
Politics.
Yeah.
Con.
Yeah.
Case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone not good? It means throughout everyone must be read as all elements must be satisfied. If speaking about all terms in one category, you must add as not the in front of the term. Protection of intellectual property means rights in all forms of intellectual property. The word of, integrate, aggregate, whole of, significant, suggest rather than whole rather than partial. That's WPA, Goldstein 14, GU, and no day, the House 88, CGS 78, and Morrison 2. They don't vote negative for limited ground, tiny half, zero debatability, and still generics vote negative. They haven't met their solid issues of topicality and abuse. They're not unconditionally hospitable. It will be impact turned below. Racial audit counterplan drop the F is worse. Circumvention risk could be inhospitable. You should vote negative because they violate their own ethics and haven't checked that they are unconditionally hospitable. So only a risk of negative offense. Also conceding now unique racism, unconditional hospitality is high. The staff gets rolled back, sliding scale, no fiat action because they're new AF. Criminal liability, environmental beliefs and bad is the reason to reject the counterplan, not team concede permit test competition. Theories the reason to reject the young, not the team. Same for states and ITC generic. The ITC counterplan. I'll do condo here. It's good against new apps. One, arbitrariness. New apps generate a structural advantage. Stand back classes for clash, vote neg, dispo, and after choice estimate neg prep and are more unfair on this topic where the neg has no generics. Two, arbitrariness. This was undefined. Ships go post after the one to see has been read. All non-rest theory rejected. T argument not to see my slippery slopes and knowing fiat. Three, reasonability. It's a new app. Four, excuse inevitable. T, this has speed highlighting framework case in case they had some policy justification, but I'll answer the K1 below. Unilab. Do both fails, it's mutually exclusive. The counterplan bans increasing domestic IPR protections. No new one-error answers or clarification. Block choices are based on choosing mistakes. Anything else justifies sandbagging is infinitely unpredictable. Also applies to the other purposes. No combination of the planks could ever generate uniqueness for the disadvantage since it'll do the exact same thing or just ban the plan. I'll preempt it if they try to explain it as ban all other IPR. The plan preserves the status quo and allows Trump to continue tariffing. The counterplan resets IP and it only bans tariffs that are not related to Special 301, a report that's only made when the U.S.'s domestic IP is stronger than other countries. The perm includes the plan, an increase in domestic IPR that makes it stronger than other countries, which offsets international IPR harmony that creates the justification for tariffs. Remember, the counterplan bans all tariffs that are not justified, which means it essentially allows tariffs to flourish while the counterplan alone would ban tariffs and reset the U.S. in trade. This provides the basis for the U.S. to use Special 301 that causes escalatory tariffs, which is sufficient. The non-unique stuff, one, this was answered above and solved by the counterplan. We do not have to win it. Two, the brink is now future tariffs spillover and imminent. The counterplan is essentially ban tariffs, not necessarily just about Special 301. Measuring foreign presidents of zone doing single-handedly push the economy into being of chaos with new tariffs, the stock market catered. Businesses throughout the plans and leaders are prepared for a future without the richest countries in the nation. Center of international trade drop back down. Will most of the tariffs uncertainty legal damage has been done. 10% blanket tariffs imposed on Sunday now apply nation world policing first without which largest economy 25% tariffs is charging partners other tariffs are on hold for 90 days such ways as unreliability. How does anyone know that will not change his mind, which is sufficient because even if IP has been done in the past, that doesn't apply to the counterplan since the brink is now, which is the precedent all of the thumpers. Even if the plan doesn't change enforcement of international statutes, it makes the U.S. domestic IPR stronger than other countries, which is enough for the U.S. to do another Special 301 report next year, even if it's already been done this year. Borders counterplan added the net benefit solves health justice. Open borders are also more hospitable, avoids risk of DA. So you should vote on this kind of plan alone because it increases unconditional hospitality. And they drop the racial audit stuff. No links to net benefit. Want to see evidence this is popular and does not cause PCN. We're the only ones who have evidence on this question in the first place. Permanent to both links to politics will be below. Do counterplan as a voter for Afghanistan since it doesn't strengthen copyright. Links to net benefit was above. The ethics of counterplan is wrong. As the debate argument is conditionality, as the debate argument is different. If we go for the counterplan, there is no condition on any hospitality. It should be as multiple worlds. In the world of the counterplan, there's nothing hospitable or conditional for anything. It's obviously not bad to avoid net benefits. That's not inconsistent with unconditional hospitality. We get new answers if the one year tries to re-explain it because the counterplan alone is enough and invites other people into the world that we have created. But otherwise, the DA impact terms, the dissent impact circumvents unconditional hospitality and makes it impossible for anyone to generate any vision of ethics. If we're all dead, you should only evaluate purely hypothetical government actions and only consequences. They have to win this debate influences how the world operates with their system of ethics. Only vote app is a good idea. If we win the counterplan isn't that good, then it's enough to vote neg. The politics DA drops, or unilateral DA go up to a trade war outweighs the collapse of trade, removes economic constraints and military aggression that triggers nuclear escalation in global hotspots such as Ukraine, Europe, and the Middle East. Impact has dropped. No new one-hour answers is at 100, so it's tried high for the negative. Politics DA also dropped the permanent impact reconciliation and debt ceiling is necessary for defense spending, which is key to stop against China and Russia, and for hegemony. The not extending is bad was answered above. The first thing about the first card they read about the DA is irrelevant. It's just tax cuts good for the wealthy. There's no terminal impact to it as of the 2AC. We get new answers because the card was marked too early and they didn't make a claim as per the tag. Regardless, the case will prove conditional hospitality is a bad way to view the world, which also answers everything they've said already. I'll preempt in case they do read it. We do fight warming with cuts in healthcare, but there's no extinction scenario about that regardless. No fiscal collapse, just an assertion. This is also from 09. We never defaulted, which means that the status quo dumps. They say won't pass. The 1C card is the best evidence in this debate. Trump is the gravitational force holding the bill together independently, which is sufficient and it's rhetorically powerful because it proves that PC solves and overcomes any existing pressures that are in their card. They also marked it too early. We get new answers. Negotiations proof post sent for 22. Anticipates bill will be a start of summer. Things are moving very quickly. Supposed to finalize it. President sauce by next week. Aligns with Johnson's aspirations and ambitions. Go Hassett, Johnson, Thune, Bassett, Claypool, and Smith held regular meetings in case they try to say it's tax cuts. That's irrelevant. It's part of the same bill as the reconciliation. Key moves are imminent. Cone 424 is extending the TCGA is making progress with key moves, especially made them from recess. Broad allies have been approved so far. Instructions give them more breathing room to do things. Link, they've dropped it. The plan all IP is unpopular, which means that Congress would backlash to the plan. Trump would have to use PC to try to pass it, and it would derail passage. The states counterplan concede permanent test competition case, and ConCon as well. That case. Role of the judges to reject the act is a bad idea. Reject the conception of ethics. 1, it's arbitrary, proven by whatever they said, and the 1AC is not substantiated by anything, and how everything in the 2AC was just a word salad without any words or explanation as to why those things are necessarily true. This link turns their arbitrariness word, which I'm not even sure what it was in the 2AC, so we get new on-air answers to only UTO saves lives, extinction outweighs because it threatens billions of lives and causes mass suffering in the progress, and precludes the possibility for improvement, which turns all of their framing arguments. 3, degree of wrongness. Only UTO can explain that unconditional hospitality has no explanation of the difference between a timeout and Japanese internment camps. Framing issue, do not vote on something you cannot explain. It's not even the 2-0 gets nuances or whatever the 2AR said, because the 2AC explained jack shit with just assertions without a word for why anything is even true or beneficial relationship to the other. What the hell does that mean in the context of U2 and to this side, and why does that justify their theory and why that's beneficial? If the 1AR re-explains immediately, strike it, reject the argument. We do not endorse this book, reject the theory arguments or reasons to reject the argument, not the team, and not going for itself. Having conceded that they are non-arbitrary obviously makes no sense how it governs everything. Default to UTO is the only non-arbitrary standard. Chapel 22, utilitarianism, the default standing for theorizing of something benefits us personally, easy to convince ourselves that it must be okay to account for biases, enforce impartiality, imagining behind governance if you're likely to end up being everyone prudent to maximize overall well-being, equal weight, so when outcomes are uncertain, when instead access the weight assessed by probabilities, better for you and expectations, expanding the moral circle past moral atrocities, perpetrators including victims, protection, and making error, expand on moral concern. We all know competing view of superior after how, given how terrible killing is. We now wanted less of it, theological speculative that worrying, more based off narcissistic, making the own moral clarity, or appear hands and impartial observers hope for best outcomes. The ontological teachers results from emotional bias, favor those of self-justification, evolution is not by judgments, inconsistent emotional responses to favoritism. Only utilitarianism is good because pain and pleasure are scientific. Sample 15. Phenomenal introspection of goodness is pressure, utilitarianism, goodness, dramatic evidence of POV. Pleasure of experience, phenomenal introspection, only reliable process for describing moral truths, intuitive, confounding, counting examples of more error, beliefs, only reliable process. Pleasure is the only thing that is good. Truth, relying solely on phenomenal instruction reveal the nature of goodness. Ethics cannot outweigh. There's no reason to prefer it. Necrophilia is bad because it disgusts people. Surveillance causes harm. Both of those would be rejected under utilitarianism. If there's no alternative, those cards I read above also say it's wrong. It's also wrong. It's not genocidal because obviously genocide is bad. No root cause. We always try to solve extinction. Eliminate the other is nonsense. We get new answers if there's an actual explanation as to how that gets there, because policymakers also always prioritize extinction. We do solve genocide, proven by how we stopped Hitler because he was killing people. They were claiming stuff was impact turn above. And extinction is the worst form of genocide, which means that they allow it in straight terms. All of their offense about genocide, bad, binary is irrelevant because it's just a bunch of word salad. In the 2 ethical demands that make tough choices. Deal on tacticals, catastrophic waste 99 quadri, intel stress among opportunity on advantages, disadvantages, use lesser evils, good intentions, catastrophic consequences necessary to weigh, finding solutions imperatives, essential to embrace ambiguities without illusion of one size fits all.
Different cross-checks?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to start with some conditions under utilitarianism. So, if the NSA is watching me naked in my hotel room, and I will never figure out about the NSA doing that, is that good under util?
What do you say?
The instinctual reason why that would be bad is that there's a significant risk you would find out or it'd be used.
No. If I never find out, is the NSA broadcasting
Well, the point
that
is
to the
that
world?
this hypothetical is absurd.
Like the world, there would be people who would try to fight for your rights.
Huh?
They would say that.
Okay,
You're
let's say
suffering
it's
with
just people who, in the NSA, want to get rid of this brown guy who might be a terrorist, right? Is it justified if I never find out?
No, because you're suffering.
How am I suffering?
What they also think that you're suffering is.
What if they? Okay, well, I'm just more okay. Necrophilia. Why is it bad under pain and pleasure?
Because someone else finds it disgusting.
Okay, what if no one else finds out? What if the person who?
It's okay. Util is about the potential, like positive and
I
negative.
can answer my question. Necrophilia. Is it good or bad under pain and pleasure if nobody else finds out?
Bad because someone could, and it's
No.
just
If
a
no
way
one
to
else
find
finds out,
out.
if no one else finds out, is it good or bad? Yes or no?
We can't just contain it to if no one else finds out because someone will. Or
Okay,
the
so
chance
you
that someone
can't
will
know.
also creates the risk.
So
that
wait,
if someone
how-
does find out.
Okay, so
It also creates
you
damage
can't
to
know
the body.
that. So you can't know the consequences of whether or not someone will find out.
What? What do you mean you can't know the consequences? That's bad.
Okay. The
So
trade
yeah, we know the
deal-
consequences.
The trade deal, I'm a little bit confused on the impact level. Can you explain like why now is key for tariffs, considering Trump already initiated a ton? Why did that cause a trade war?
Well, Majarian says that he actually didn't. So,
He didn't instill tariffs on other countries?
well, he did some, but but then he rolled back most of those other ones.
Okay, so what about this next Special 301 report is key to creating all these new tariffs that will cause extinction?
It doesn't have to be because the counterplan bans tariffs and the perm does not.
Why doesn't the permutation ban tariffs?
Because it creates special 301 reports, and the counterplan says the tariffs can only be banned if there's no special 301 report. So yeah, I mean, you didn't say the perm anyways, so
Yeah, so
you didn't say the right perm.
So the permutation only functions because. So why would the plan have to trigger a special 301 report? It only applies domestically.
Special, yeah, that's the point. Because it
explain-
applies domestically, that offsets harmony between U.S. IP protections and international IP protections.
Okay,
someone
other
in the
countries
US
do not have the U.S.'s standard of fair use for facial surveillance. Why does that offset the U.S. with other countries? Do you have any specific evidence?
You should read some. You dropped the link, or you
Well,
didn't
I
answer the
didn't.
counterplan in the 2AC. You also made it wrong.
I'm asking about the link and you haven't explained it. What other countries
What
don't-
cards we read it into an RP read point out cards?
Okay, so you can't name a single other country.
Russia, China. I named countries.
Okay.
Turning that off now. It's going to be the legal formalism critique. Is anybody? One second. Yeah. For sure.
Let me find the right photo.
Anyone not good?
The critique
critique outweighs formalism. First is formalism causes a bunch of really bad stuff, assumptions of rationality, behavioral correspondence, enable policy failure that guarantees societal collapse through ecological overshoot and emerging technology. Faith in law as a neutral, unthinking object ruins the design of legal systems, so situations making violence inevitable, makes circumvention inevitable, and triggers the advantage via poorly designed IP law. Specifically, it turns the case they frame legal actors like judges and agencies as rational calculators who will respond predictably to stronger IP rules. They assume that if fair use is narrowed, behavior will automatically change. This treats legal actors like economic agents to maximize the incentives and assumes law functions mechanically like an economic model. This means that the plan's solvency is zero. We have certainly won a link and we've disputed the utility of their unconditional ethic in the first place. Empirics who negative. Trump has blatantly refused court orders in the plan. Cannot be on ice without being extra topical. Saying its inevitability, formalist paradigms are unsustainable. The result is technopoly zero's ability for the plan to be enforced or even be conceptualized in the first place. Mayors 21. Policy coded as technique existing for moral righteousness and formalism, realism is technopoly insists on law, limited to technique rather than social intervention. And technopoly habits of society inadequate to cope with information and the chaos to generate judgment and common law, climate change, and disease and health of the planet and lock and only meaningful that can preserve the planet's ever-present survival to arrest its extinction. The current legal regime does not feel adequate or technical modes of adjusting prisoners too slowly or simply overcome by data and debate and unable to act their aggression argument. They've considered our theory of legal formalism, which operates at the level of solvency in political action, even if they win unconditional hospitality is good as a meta ethic. It begs the question of how to best actualize it, which we are crushing them on. Next is framework, where evaluating competing legal philosophies IPR. The negative is to disprove the legal theory or propose a better alternative. Prefer it. Testing schools of thought on IP is better than testing individual cases of ethics. Privileging weighing the case for goes refining economic thought at the foundation of IP debates. This brackets the plan's ethic in favor of legal philosophy. It's a logical prerequisite because they must win political action translates to their ethic in order to have any office. That weighs first is form prior to implementation. The particular legal form of advocacy should be our starting point, not an overarching ethical theory that merely retrenches the same legal formalism with a different justification which precludes solvency. That's our Bangladesh evidence theory. Second is exportability. Don't weigh the case. Formalism imaginaries include the psychological and social commitments that underlie how law operates. This is their argument, which means that we access the root cause. Forefront critical engagement to operationalize the law's values, norms. Mind legalism is a better construction of our world than the matter of formalism. Realism is a better fit law in its neoclassical form. Valorizes common law structure of institutions, central policy, and economic arena. Disease that connectors offer new resident realism against the challenges predestined to our liberty. Realism is determined by consequences of wealth. This fantasy engaging values and pragmatism. Realism provides a critical engagement. Stress and operationalization requires attention to psychological mechanisms that facilitate deliberation. Realism refutes the idea that judges are experts or solve our problems. The one AR will say link turn. We oppose consequentialism. That is not precisely our argument. They entrench consequentialism via their ethic of legal realism. 3 is mutual exclusivity. Even if they get to weigh the place, use philosophical competition. Every link determines that demonstrates the one is wedded to an ideology contrary to the alternative, meaning any permutation necessarily discovers that their argument not fairness. This was a blip, which you should give the one AR none of it, regardless. First, no impact. The only thing that matters is what we learn is pointless to protect reverse activity. Second, neg flex outweighs zero IPR specific distance across 3 unique topic areas, especially versus new assets that TOC that inevitably come. Any neg offense is good and necessary. Defending your legal theory on IPR topic is the floor for debate proved by Sweet and Harrison, like counterpoints based on common law. Interpretation limits out cases unrelated from the topic, like death, cold, or Bochard reject their appeals to fairness. They were more unfair and nuanced to reapply the binary between the self and the other, and nuke our prep, link turn the their interpreter results in worse debates than the neg only has for process counterplans, but debates about legal theories that far more random IPR policies, and we solve legalism literally underpins the entire patent structure, the entire IPR structure. All of their arguments on the case and about solvency and how they're able to exactly prove the link, the permutation. One is double-minded, their separate justifications, and moving the target which kills flash, or framework obviates the benefit. Each link demonstrates the plan, and the alter fundamentally incompatible. Second is translation link. The plan infuses economic methods into formalistic legal tests that scientists IP law by treating protection as a discrete mechanical logic that perfectly corresponds with law, and that law is able to correspond with action. That's our Lynn Bloom evidence. Nation state good is not responsive. The alternative spells better, but in a way that utilizes the nation state legal systems correctly, which they have no game on as of the 2AC, which means you should give the 1AR absolutely zero offense here. 3 is no perms under their interpretation. Their defense of the plan should be unconditional. They can only agree with the critique in the context of the all be read, which is exactly why they've critiqued our use of net benefits. The perm after the lens is wrong. It severs their political ethic, which they agreed is the basis for competition. That's a voting issue. It makes the plan conditionally hospitable. And or just the alternative is legal realism rather than reliance on formalist prescriptions, positive forward visions of formal visions of desired end goals. That starts with revising academic discourse, proposing IPRs hollow without detailed discussion of what ideological presuppositions affect its implementation. Instead of asking what happens when the IP is strengthened, its relation to ethics, realism begins to recognize that legal truths are polyvalent and not discoverable. That's able to solve the case better because we've disputed their ability to solve for any unconditional hospitality in the first place. Recall cross-examination when they said that solvency was a necessary precondition to the affirmative winning, which means that winning any of this critique is sufficient to vote negative. Their cap good stuff is certainly no link to it. Legal realism compatible with free markets and growth. The TOC need a defense of law, not economics. Realism, the critique of neoclassical laws presumes set of assumptions about legal actors. It disagrees with the assumption that lawyers, judges, or bureaucrats are discrete, rational, calculating agents that can successfully apply formulaic rules. Whether concepts like efficiency or expected value can be redeemed is certainly beside the point. Perm, non-mutually exclusive. 1, it's intrinsic. It includes functions of the words that either they all know the plan, any material effects are indeterminate, and only occur endorsing legal realism, so it's impossible to fiat through. That's bad. It spikes out of all net grounds since they're low limited edition, and links the unconditional stuff I did above. Science fails because do both branches apply. They're vague. Their ultimate text thing first. No link. The 1NC text is clear because it's a tag. Cross-ex checks, and the TOC can clash by defending legal formalism in the first place. That turns the cases violent under their framework. They should be unconditionally hospitable, regardless of the clarity of the alternative's function. Did you drop anything? No. Cool. Good.
657.
Consent. Okay, this order will also be. It will be the hospitality advantage. Let me see what's next. The new sheet / T subsets definition span. The advantage counterplan / borders counterplan. The racial audit counterplan. The legal formalism critique. The Unilat DA. And politics DA.
So formalism, unilat, politics.
Yeah.
Can you say that all one more time?
Yeah. It's the hospitality advantage, topicality, advantage counterplan, racial audit counterplan, legal formalism K, unilateralism BA, politics. Awesome. Peninsula, y'all good? Yeah.
Affirm unconditional hospitality by protecting copyright for undocumented immigrants. The role of the judge is to maximize hospitality. Prefer an ethics configures itself in the other, and deconstructing that defines what is ethical in the first place. It's not arbitrary. They've conceded that all ethics are relational and prior questions to the implementation of the plan. That is O'Hara, and that means that if we win that the plan is ethical, then and that they have been unethical, you should vote AF, because your role of the judge is to maximize hospitality through ethics. They've conceded that meta-ethical question, which means you have to prioritize it. Our role is not arbitrary. Their only assertion, the pain and pleasure are equally arbitrary as per utilitarianism. Their Chappelle evidence does not give any warrants for why there's more arbitrary than the plan, which means there's no link turn to hospitality. They say util saves lives, so does hospitality because it saves migrants on the border. But importantly, it's about utilitarianism is genocidal. Prioritizing the worst logic, even when there's a low risk of the worst happening in the future. Their framing calculates the absolute lesser of evils. That judgment causes genocide and erases the other, because there will always be a larger threat to subsume violence that does not reach the magnitude of extinction. That's Oliver. Those logics inadvertently cause extinction. A, there will always be another worse violence which could be prevented within the lesser of two evils. We will always be able to try to define what the worst violence is, which ensures that we will use this logic of the worst to be imaginable for calculation. That ensures that the worst becomes reality and is therefore the lesser of two evils within their calculative logics. B, the drive tends we can never know the impacts of A to the other, and the utilitarian attempt to do so denies the other their subjectivity, because it places the utility upon the other to be calculated within the risk calculus of utilitarianism. That's Andrade. Viewing the giving social aid through the lens of unconditional hospitality, we can never know the impact on the other, so it must be given unconditionally, which enters all the terms case on the DA. The or thing don't reject the argument, not the team. They choose the author to reading this debate, and they're not neutral. They should be protected from reading a racist framing argument or is racist and supports eugenics. Reject the team. They've endorsed an author whose ideas and make this space violent and unsafe for minority debaters. A loss is the only way to deter them from reading this in the future. That all this stuff about norm equality, and objectivity is answered by not being able to know the other, which is their Chappelle evidence below. They say policymakers use utilitarianism. This is totally non-falsifiable. Policymakers still ought to use unconditional hospitality. They say extinction of the worst form of genocide irrelevant. It's about consequences which we're critiquing. Nuclear war?
Yeah.
They dropped that the loss of the other is equal to nuclear war. That's Oliver. Draw the lines of magnitude to operate. They're trying to draw lines of magnitude to operate to a genocidal logic that erase the unknowability of subjectivity for the other. We meet, the plan is of all the subset, we meet planting in a vacuum space, it meets within the 21 is with the limits that falls in this.
Don't retext, just
okay, they didn't retag, so it's not a real argument, but also, we meet Mendel, or counter to Mendel, 18, strength of reduction, refer to the right center of this company considered required for strength of remedies. The House defines adequate and effective, which is outside the topic, and or either or both. One and or specific meaning expire both, and or does not mean all asserted their reference to reference of these parts are sort of relation to the other part of another community, other things to for reference for AFCON, because those things between line, infinite pace, reasonability, community, across the race to the bottom, and it's conditionally hospitable. Now, the advantage counterplan, permutation do both solves a role that justice maximize hospitality. If any, if the counterplan and the plan are both unconditionally hospitable, then we should do both of them. Unconditional hospitality is not a linear impact, it's an ethos to guide our decision making. If the two on our papers to the perm links, so the plan's hospitality is bad, then we've proven that their hospitality is disingenuous, which links to the gamer GA or the conviction which is extending now. It's a solvency deficit to their form of the counterplan. The counterplan frames unconditional hospitality as useful insofar as it avoids the DA. It places the condition on that decision to be unconditionally hospitable hospitable, then that gets asked you to be hospitable only under the conditions that the DA is avoided, which ruins counterplan solvency. Your decision to be unconditionally hospitable has to be an unconditional decision. Otherwise, the other is excluded from those decisions of hospitality, which makes them exchangeable. That's maybe associated. Also links to that benefit, even touching the border security, which links to their politics links, and the racial audit. They dropped the KFDA and counterplan logics, which so it's pretty auto app. Racial audit, counterplan permutation, do both solves. They dropped a KFDA to crossplay the DA from above, no robot fiat. Fiat solves it even against the new apps. Is a truth argument. Racism non-unique is our argument. Crossplay do both in the gamer DA.
Legal forms.
Legal formats. The app uses this formulation against itself. You can see their framework use the ethic of unconditional hospitality frame. How we approach a state, that's key. The state is a local hospitality and its actions. In the context of the app can be explained in the context of the app that the home creates sovereignty through determining who should or should not be permitted. Thus, is the locus of power and cementing its dominance outweighs everything else. That outweighs explains why states that does what it does. This group's group the one in our bliss about not meeting our ethic, the aporia frame. So you can't understand our ethic without understanding circumvention. It's not inevitable. Trump does not circumvent private companies. Will not do any more spreads. Never from selling to ICE. ICE is not robbing companies. Now they get struck down. Trump doesn't circumvent. Fiat solves no link. That's the entirety of the decay. We don't see the political process as neutral. Nobody explained it as isolated. The new apps are good because they're conditional hospitable and they're unconditionally hospitable, and we welcome you into the home. And it's kid Afghan. Floating pickers are bad because they're not hospitable. Reinforce the binary. Puts the alt over there. The now Unilat TA. Perm is 100. Crossfly the gamer DA. Above the special 301. No link. The other countries don't know about facial surveillance technology, and there's no reason special the 301 would work. And now politics. The tax cuts won't pass. Disagreements about what chambers are putting tax cuts amounts to the overwhelmingly unique Medicaid cuts are mandatory, and none of their evidence is about Medicaid. I've inserted all of it for reference. None of it says will pass.
I think it's 8:45. Run it in between.
Yeah, let's go. Interactive in this way, just water. But I should say that before. I just wanted to. Shoot, that's a good point.
New sheet, or like the old new sheet, the T argument.
It's just a sheet now.
Unilap. Advantage counterclaim. Case.
I'm sorry, I zoned out. Can you say that one more time?
T. Unilap. Advantage counterclaim. Case.
One second.
Okay, we're good. Okay. The plan is not all IPO. Drop to definition. The plan is not significant. They don't need the stock issue burden of being topical in all areas. They didn't have a counter interpretation to be interpreted relevant because they didn't counter define the word significant. No Afghan they get new apps. Predictability, no interpret. Since they didn't define anything, they also don't get to solve any of their interp because it won't be actualized. Since no one will be able to see it coming if they didn't have a definition for the word. Also, plantex in the vacuum don't have significant in plantex. You can vote neg here as well. Plantex is the only way to determine topicality, and they don't have a procedural comes before case. Topicality cannot condition anything on the 1 hour stock burden is first drop and then 2 and Z for the negative to have the burden of negating the F must be topical in the first place. Other words, not modified rest wording says must significantly increase, which means increase by all of the area, increase every single part of the topic, even if you agree it's new in the 2 AR. Unilab. Trade wars cause extinction, collapse draws in Russia and China when the impact is totally conceded and causes global nuclear war. Drop that the perm is mutually exclusive. It cannot happen in the first place. Doesn't link to the DA that they extended on the other counterplan. It's not a condition of hospitality. It's literally these two cannot physically occur. The counterplan is sufficient. Other countries don't know it's relevant because it can't happen. You weigh the counterplan versus the plan. Only the counterplan bans terrorists and restores trade collapsing now, which means that it generates uniqueness for this side. So we basically fiated into this side. The perm is mutually exclusive because the counterplan bans the plan and says that we do not increase any domestic IPR. The advantage counterplan concede perm test competition disingenuous DA. I'm going to preempt it if the trade tries to extend it. One, drop that you only evaluate counterplans and the plan based on desirability and consequentialism. Only vote after is a good idea. They must win this debate, including that influences how the world must influence their ethics use. Otherwise, their ethics is unfalsifiable and unactualizable, so it's irrelevant. It's sufficient. UTL also justifies it, and it's key to fairness. Two, false. It's bad to it's only bad to place a condition, and all this is impact because placing a condition in some cases is good and requires them winning that UTL and stuff in the first place. Hold the line. Fifth dimensional class applications cannot end my career since the 1 year spent so little time. It was flippy on the case, so no new 2 year cross applications on this. Recall all the cross moments in the 1AC that they said we have to win. The plan is a good idea. Concede perm on all other topics, not going for the policies today as well, and it doesn't apply to you now because it literally cannot happen. If they said perm if they said perm exclude in other areas, then we would have said that's a great idea. Case. Prefer you to one arbitrariness. Ethics are subjective. Unconditional hospitality could be viewed differently in different cases. It's also undefinable how to be unconditionally hospitable. Only pain and pleasure are. They've dropped bias. We're just predisposed to things that we know, which results in inaccurate descriptions of hospitality that can actually shut out immigrants, which is the 2NC card. 2, extinction DA. They subject everyone to mass amounts of suffering. It justifies terrorism, bombing, and genocide if an action is hospitable, like letting Saddam Hussein into the United States because of immigration. Every UTO bad argument links back to them because our calculus says that those things are bad, but a theory of ethics that doesn't care about consequences couldn't evaluate whether migrant violence is good or bad or not because it cannot explain degrees of wrongness, which the 1 year drop straight up ignores consequences and erases certain victims in decision calculus. Only UTO can prevent all deaths by evaluating them equally, which is anti-genocide and killing it. Link turns every single piece of offense that the 1 year went for. Only vote if you can understand their offense. The 2 year will be new. The 1 year was completely unclear because they don't have a reason why their system of ethics is preferable, only with reasons why UTO is bad. But we have UTO offense that's independent of theirs, but we link turn also resolved all of their offense, defense. We disputed their method ethics question already because you must win that UTO versus worse. Therefore, the role of the judge is to vote negative will be presented if you vote for the counterplan since it improves the desirability of the plan. Not all ethics is relational. We listed a shit ton of deontological ethics in our card that doesn't have anything to do with the self and the other. Winning the plan is not ethical. Ethical is not enough because we disputed above on the advantage counterplan. Since we placed that burden into 2AC and the 1 year drop, it is also unethical under their terms. Not sure what the 1 year answer was to extinction forecloses because they said something and that answers it. You don't have a pinpoint response to it, so you should be certain that trade wars foreclose the possibility of any freedom in the future and turns all of their offense. It proves that it is unethical and would be conditionally hospitable if you have to allow that to happen. Pain and pleasure are not arbitrary. Drop the scientific card that I extended above, which is the card that referenced the pain and pleasure. It's also know what we know to be true and comparatively less low than all their decision stuff. It can't save migrants. Their policy decision kills everyone. And the DA is 100. Try or die saves the freedom and hospitality of everyone on Earth. UTO is good in this case because it's not low risk due to technical concessions. In that case, it doesn't decenter genocide because genocide causes mass suffering. Drop the empiric of solving Hitler and preventing genocides in that case, which can be a future example for how UTO justifies solving genocide. Our impact isn't tied to low probability impact since risk isn't considered in UTO. We're also talking about magnitude only, which is sufficient, but it doesn't apply in other cases because the D side is 100. It erases others is also linked turn above. They say logic causes extinction and worse violence. Do not answer the 2NC argument that even if it does justify some amount of violence, the worst thing would always be solved. We do not justify and run to extent and creating nuclear war risk because under utilitarianism we would try to prevent the high probability ones that actually exist. Low probability risk going to be considered by actual policymakers, so you should track out all their UTO index, and genocide would still be bad because magnitude times probability ensures that lowest probability events do not matter. They say never know the impacts of A to the other, deny subjectivity. There's no terminal impact to that. Yeah, well, there's no terminal impact to that because the 1 year didn't articulate it or how it causes extinction. You should not give them drop a loss of others a complete nuclear war because it's not a complete argument. Our knowability isn't explained. There's no terminal impact. Or to reject the argument obviously is neutral because or is racist doesn't mean that our ideas are racist and what we forward is racist. That's the threshold for winning and link reasonability. We haven't caused any offense at all and tap solves any amount of racism that you have. Worst case scenario, UTO does not cause extinction because
arguments is okay because they dropped everything on
kicking
condo,
arguments
same
doesn't matter because they dropped everything on condo and you justified it. And T is a procedure that must come first.
case, T, D.
You're voting affirmative for this debate because Mike has dropped that consequentialism is inhospitable and that you should not use that in this debate. Peninsula has conceded the core thesis of our argument. Ethics are relational. The binary between the self and the other configures every relationship. Why does racism occur? Because a white self puts itself above the black other below. That hierarchy justifies racist actions. Only through a deconstruction of that hierarchy can we understand what it even means to be ethical. That's all our Halloran evidence, extended by name in every 1AR and 2AC and affirmative overview and dropped in every single negative speech. The only non-arbitrary framework can be unconditional hospitality because this is the only framework that can cohere value. It's proven by cross-examination. Why is necrophilia bad? Why is government surveillance bad? Their framework cannot answer these questions. Only our relationship to the other can. Because of that, use unconditional hospitality as a meta-ethic to determine the framing debate. Your role is to maximize hospitality. You cannot disintegrate the manner in which you determine the desirability of actions without understanding the impacts of the moral frameworks that undergird those. The 2 drops. Consequentialism is bad for the other. It's game over. Attempting to determine utility of the other by weighing its pain or pleasure creates conditional hospitality that attempts to derive and know what the other's subjectivity is. That's bad. That means that because it attempts to get something out of the other, which is in its core conditional hospitality, which is unethical if we win our moral framing. So which means that as long as we win, unconditional hospitality is a meta ethic you use in this debate, then we win because they've dropped that consequentialism is conditionally hospitable. That means you should refuse to calculate for the other. Instead, open the home through the plan. This is all explained in our Andrade evidence, which has been referenced in every speech and subsequently dropped. You don't have to just check out on we don't understand their arguments when we've read evidence in the 1AC that substantiates all of this. Remember, Peninsula has not given you any reason to determine the desirability between our moral frameworks, or they keep asserting that util is only non-arbitrary, but can't respond to a cross-ex question about why necrophilia is bad. When the 2AC, 1AR, and 2 now 2AR all say the word meta-ethic, it means that you use unconditional hospitality as a meta-ethic as an ethic to determine which ethic to use in this debate. That means you will act because unconditional hospitality is the best approach to ethics itself, and the way you endorse that is through the plan because it reduces facial surveillance for migrants, which deconstructs the notion of the home. We're the only team with an explanation of how to decide which framework to use. Arbitrariness, what's the impact? You know you have the affirmative, has a link turn, and you know that we've conceded our theory of power, which means it's all game over. The 2 also drops that the Oliver evidence, which says the logic of utilitarianism engages in a violent line-drawing measure that always attempts to frame out the worst violence, which means that you should elevate the other to that of nuclear war, which means that even if they win all their framing offense under the usual version of util, you still vote affirmative because unconditional hospitality is the equivalent of millions and infinite nuclear war, which means that it certainly outweighs a marginal risk of DIA. When they've dropped case, they say arbitrariness. That was all indicted above. The bias is not explained, and bias cannot apply to the other because their evidence is about traditional deontological values, not unconditional hospitality, which is not a deontological value, but a way to determine ethics and determine relationality. The extinction DIA is wrong. Our interpretation still allows for understanding extinction, and understanding that extinction is bad. It just says that unconditional hospitality is a prior meta-ethic which should be determined before. Role of the judge is to maximize hospitality. They have no reason to prefer theirs over ours. They say the trade wars foreclose the possibility of unconditional hospitality, which means they mean unconditional hospitality. That's incorrect. They've dropped every speech, half speech, which has said that the unconditional hospitality is the deconstruction of hierarchies, and that preventing extinction doesn't deconstruct any hierarchy. They say they say technical concessions mean they win. That's wrong. Those flip affirmative. They say their logic doesn't cause extinction. I'm not going for the rest of the Oliver K. Proper. They say the unknowability argument, that's irrelevant. The magnitude times probability still requires consequentialism, which means a lot of the 2R is irrelevant because they have a justification for why risk analysis is good, but not why weighing consequences in the first place is good. Top Kelly, the 2 dropped that because they didn't include tags, we're not burdened to answer these definitions because they weren't arguments or evidence in the 2 and C. Even if you think you can distinguish the cards and tags by looking at the speech stock, you can't flow them because they're all mashed together. And said authors after, are you really going to end my career on just 6 definitions of T subsets without tags in the 2 and C? But grammatically, there's 0 violation because they didn't answer our other definitions. Only going for significantly means that we do strengthen protection and copyright, since in can be within protection, which is the object of significantly, and can be for subsets. For evidence in the context of IPR, they've dropped Mandel, which defines the most resolution warning, so it's way more predictable. They've also dropped reasonability theory debates and hidden top arguments like this, crowd out substance and scourge substantive debating, which is the only thing we get from debate. You know what?
Fair issue, all of this office about the DA is kind of irrelevant because it's just a uniqueness counterplan, which gets them the DA and the consequential isn't bad, which means you refuse to weigh the DA in the first place. 200 drops to 1 ER per double bind. Either Section 301 report that was initiated 3 weeks ago triggered the link for massive tariffs to come, or the plan is dropped in the bucket because it doesn't actually cause other countries, us to cause other tariffs, because other countries don't have the plan. They've failed to provide you with a link argument. Why would changing the U.S. domestic policy on fair use cause Trump to tariff other countries? Either way, the Section 301 report came out, and here's the deal. No tariffs came from it, which means, you know, it's a certain half ballot.
Like hard docs science, but I have a different version just including it's a
gets them from the front. Keep them behind. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. How you doing, man?
Good, good. So this is Cardinal. Do another one?
Say no.
Yes. I'm unconditionally stable drug testing.
This guy, I remember his merch at our school. I've seen him.
It's actually true. It's actually true. Kind of true. TO's kind of true.
If I had last year's dude, freaking get up.
Oh yeah.
MBA, did you all send a card back?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, got it. I'm stupid, sorry.
didn't put the T definition. I didn't put the T definitions in the doc. Is that okay?
Yeah. What is card you want me to read on useless inhospitable? Is it the Android?
Android,
Like,
yeah.
okay.
It's like nearly all fucking. Yeah.
Congratulations to both teams on reaching the quarterfinals and turning the champions. It's a massive accomplishment. The decision is a 2-1 for the affirmative. Do you all want decisions?
Yeah.
Okay.
I stop. So, Charlie team. I was out here. I very hesitantly concluded that the 2NR did not extend an interpretation that they have done on me. 1ER does have this like no tag, no argument thing. 2NR, not really great answer. 2ER looking directly at me and telling me if I don't have an argument like flow on my sheet that I'm not voting on is fairly persuasive to me. And I look back at my flow and I just don't have the word significant on my flow. So like call me a dinosaur or whatever, like yell at me for not looking at speech shocks, but I just don't have it. So that plus offensive favor substance credit, if I was wavering anywhere, I'm just like, might have been also off on the grammar argument, might have had to think about it a bit more, but whatever. Ethics stuff. So, feel like I was given a lot of top-line claims on both sides and not great ways to resolve a lot of stuff, but maybe I'm just not thinking through things, I don't really know. 2ER goes for meta-ethics first. Root cause of all ethics is this relationship stuff. 2ER says this is how I should choose what ethical framework I use. Frankly, I don't know how this helps me choose between an ethic of consequentialist util and a util of, your util of hospitality. I don't really understand why it is true that all ethics are relational. If it is true that why all ethics are relational, why that means that consequentialism / utilitarianism cannot function as an ethical theory. So I try reading some AFEB to see if I can help you out here. I come up short. The top line meta-ethics card just kind of asserts that ethics are based on relations without really a warrant in my mind, and especially not a warrant that I don't think is explained to me at any point in debate. And going to above point, even if that's true, I don't really understand why utilitarianism is not a relational theory. It seems like my self-actions have consequences on the other, which seems like a logical work done given the 2NR explanation of like the other and other people are hurt under a world in which we get rid of utilitarianism. So I don't know why ethics is based on relationships is a reason to reject consequentialism and utilitarianism and to prefer your ethics. The 2NR has this argument that AF has reasons why util is bad, but not really reasons why your ethics is good. And I think this is kind of right, because you're constantly referring to this like meta-ethics question, which, as I determined earlier, is like I don't really know what to do with, and I don't think that excludes a theory. So even if I think util has some issues, I'm really at a loss for how to evaluate impacts under unconditional hospitality. I kind of buy the 2NR top line argument of AF ethics are just arbitrary, just evolve into consequentialism. At the end of the day, I just don't know how I determine whether the plan is unconditionally hospitable. I suppose because it attempts to break down the hierarchy, but it seems like you were clear this wasn't deontological or a priority. You keep saying that consequences of the plan cannot be separated from the ethics question, which makes sense to me, but then you're like, consequences, don't evaluate them. So it's just ethics at that point, which at that point keeps going circular. So at the end of the day, I'm sitting here, I'm keep trying to go in my head all this ethics stuff, and I keep going in circles, and I just don't feel comfortable telling Peninsula how I would resolve things under, or like why I would choose your paradigm of ethics over theirs. So, and further, a lot of the 2ER impact and ethos moments of like, to really take down and explain why their theory is arbitrary, yours isn't, about this like necrophilia stuff and surveillance stuff, I actually think they have pretty good answers in cross-ex, and like, those made sense to me. So, it's like the impact moments you're going for to really convince me aren't really vibe moving. So I go to the dissad, think it's 100%, 2ER kind of missed the boat on the 2NR argument that's plan or counterplan. Counterplan gets rid of tariffs because the firm is mutually exclusive, so 301 stuff doesn't really matter at all. Last thing, I consider the argument that the impact of the loss of the subject on the other is infinite nuclear war, which I agree the 2NR does not have a super on-point response to, but to the point at which I'm defaulting to util, I don't think the app solves the loss of the subject. It seems like obviously we attempt to, and we do solve some things, but even if the magnitude is high, probability that we solve the loss of the subject seems small, since we're never really contesting that as a project that we can possibly accomplish. So, and like their extinction. So, I'm there.
I can go next. I think Adam's decision makes a lot of sense. I think that both teams could have benefited from a lot more hand-holding in this debate. I think at the end we were left with a lot of claims that we were not sure how to interact with each other, at least I was, which was kind of hard to resolve in a lot of places. I ended up voting affirmative to affirm unconditional hospitality, which is good for both its own ethical reasons as well as under a consequentialist framework. I think the nuclear war thing is really important. MBA is winning that I should artificially scale up the impact of their ethics to the Oliver explanation as per the 1AC evidence, which means even under consequentialism, I think the case largely outweighs because there is no defense in the 2NR. The 2AR at least asserts some defense to the disad, which means the risk cannot be 100. I still evaluate framing. I think this is equally problematic for the neg. If MBA wins this meta ethic of the debate, it being unconditional hospitality, then I should refuse to even evaluate the disad because it is conditional, as Peninsula is only advocating for it insofar as it avoids the disadvantage. Avoids the extinction. 2NR answers to this argument are all consequentialism arguments, so if I conclude AF on that part of the debate, I would conclude AF on the disad regardless. So I start in case. The 2AR push here is that the AF is an index consequentialism rather than utilitarianism, which sets the frame for how I evaluate the page. I think lowers the threshold for AF framing because they do not have to win util bad, they just have to win that we cannot evaluate consequences, so we should default to their ethic of unconditional hospitality. Key arguments the neg makes defending consequentialism. First is objectivity. 2NR says both on the disad and on case that ethics can only be weighed insofar as they have consequences. I think the AF is winning this argument that consequences are inherently relational, i.e. all ethical theory are rooted in this relationship between the subject and the other. The AF's logic attempts to know what the neg's logic attempts to know what the other thinks and feels, thus is inherently conditional in a sense, which links to all of their ethics framing being bad. I think Adam's probably right that this is super circular. I just don't think the 2NR is doing the work enough for me to just pull the trigger on like their answers don't make any sense. I think we needed a 2MC push on the falsifiability of this argument. How do they know it to be true, etc. Which you do start in cross-ex. I just wish that analysis would have made it into the 2NR. 2AR says only from this point can we start to understand what it means to be ethical, so I understand the AF's framework as a precondition to consequentialism. I also think the AF, I kind of disagree with Adam on this cross-ex moment. I think you're giving not the best answers to this like necrophilia stuff, which I think is an odd thing to run to for the example, but I think you just need to like get disease. There's so many problems with it, like other than like whether people know what you're doing, which I also think is like an odd way to frame this question. But regardless, I think your answers probably could be more consequentialist in this fact, which gives them some skin in the game when they answer this arbitrary stuff. You also make this degree of wrongness argument. The 2NR at the top says unconditional hospitality cannot be a moral framework because it cannot just explain degrees of wrongness. My understanding of this is just another reason why the AF's moral theory links back to all their util bad warrants, that's genocide, nuclear war stuff. I already explained above why I think they access nuclear war still, so I don't think there's any impact calculus explaining why they're uniquely worse. I default to Oliver because I don't think the 2NR has an on-point answer. Topicality, I don't evaluate it because of the lack of tags, but if this was answered in the 2NR, I think I would have been pretty clean on planet in a vacuum. They don't say significantly, vote in.
Okay. I largely agree with CM's decision. So the short of my decision is I decide the AF's impact is equivalent to nuclear war. So even if I were to grant you all your consequentialism stuff, the AF either outweighs or is equivalent to the DA, at which point I vote AF because there's a counterpoint, so presumption votes AF. T was 0. I only flow the words I understand you saying. I do not have the word significant on my flow. So yeah. So then I go to the DA. I first ask if there is a link. So the app does not extend a permutation, which I actually am a little bit confused about. The 2AC says permutation due to plan and any combination of the planks. I believe that perm due to plan and ban 301 would likely solve the DA, although the link stuff is not super well explained, so like maybe there's a part that I'm missing. So reach the conclusion that it is AF versus like fiated and tariffs DA. Then ask, is there a related uniqueness claim that tariffs are coming out? It's like, yes. So I am choosing between, do I ban tariffs that are impending and guarantee a nuclear trade war, or do I vote affirmative? All of which brings me to framing. The big thing for me is this like double dropped AF argument that I should inflate their impact to be nuclear war. And that's like where my decision kind of ends. But I do evaluate some of the rest of this, and I think that the app is winning a meta-ethical claim that only through deconstruction can we even understand what is ethical, which means that their ethics are a prerequisite to consequentialism in the first place. So even if you win consequentialism is best, for me to then know what consequences matter more than others, I would need their meta-ethical theory about why otherization is the standard I should apply under a framework of consequentialism. I do not really think the neg is winning arbitrariness. There's not really an explanation in the 2NR for why the apps thing is arbitrary. It's just asserted that it is, and I think 2 is pretty compelling here that it's been very clearly explained in the speech. We should deconstruct binaries. The sort of hierarchy of self over the other is the root of all impacts. I think that is like a very clear advanced standard. And I also think that, sort of like Sam mentioned, these cross-sex moments about things like necrophilia sort of give the AF leeway on arbitrariness, because I'm not ultimately super compelled by the neg's answers, or certainly don't understand why they are any less arbitrary than the AF's things. I thought a little bit about this degrees of wrongness thing, because I do think the AF could use like maybe a better on-point answer to this. The issue I have is I don't really know what the like impact to that is. Like, I kind of agree that we need consequentialism to differentiate different degrees of wrongness, but I don't really know why that matters, and you haven't explained like why differentiating different degrees of wrongness is a thing that I should care about in terms of their ethics. And also, because see above, like, you both have a nuclear war impact, so there is no differential in degree of wrongness. The last thing I thought about was trade war forecloses ethics, because I do think, like, I don't think the 2AR had a great answer, but the AF is winning, like, a sort of medic ethics first argument, so in order for me to give you that argument, I would have to evaluate the DA consequentially, which means if they win, I should reject consequentialism. Like, I could get there to say that the DA chose ethics. Yeah.
On the nuclear war thing, I had on my flow and I said this in speech that no matter how bad the violence gets, their argument is just that we always like defer, like don't try to solve genocide. That means coming to nuclear war. I said that if it ever gets to there, that veto just means that we would stop the nuclear war. Does that not answer the argument?
So I think the AF is making two different arguments.
Okay.
One is they have this sort of like, our thing is the root cause of all violence makes nuclear war extinction inevitable, which this is an answer to.
Okay.
They also have a separate argument that if they are right about their like theory of otherization and the way the world works, I should inflate their impact to like treat it equivalently to nuclear war. So it's not that their like ethics or consequentialism causes nuclear war, but instead that I should understand the terminal impact of otherization as equivalent to nuclear war. And those are two separate arguments.
What's the war for why you should do that?
When I see all of our evidence is where they get this. It's like you can't calculate these people, these like the other, because of the whole reason they think that this meta-ethics of trying to know the other is wrong. So because they're incalculable, you should inflate it to an incalculable level of nuclear war. I think. I think that, wait, really quickly, I do think the 2AR needs to both make this distinction more clear and have a much better explanation of Oliver, because I did consider just like, I don't know how to distinguish these two absent having to intervene a little bit. I determined that based on how much I had intervened elsewhere, given the lack of judge instruction, I thought that was totally fine, but I can see other people not being willing to do that.
I guess two questions about that. I have floated in the 1AR that dropped loss of other is nuclear war, not a reason. I said in the 2NR that it's not a complete argument because they didn't have justification. Was there just a word float and I didn't catch it, or because I don't understand.
I guess for me, the 2AC makes this claim. The 2AC
Okay.
has a warrant.
Okay.
I understood it in the 2AC. So the
Okay.
one they are pointing out that it was dropped and extending the claim is pretty sufficient
Okay.
for me.
And I guess the second question would be, because util above says that like you should only evaluate pain and pleasure since it's scientifically knowable, would that not be an answer to unknowability?
So I actually thought about this because I don't have a great on point to their answer. The issue is that like what I have on my flow in the 2NR is sort of just like pain and pleasure, it's scientific. I think maybe I have the word like objective or something, but I have very few words and I don't really understand like why that is the case, especially given some of the other sort of arbitrariness debating that's occurring throughout the debate in the cross-sexes. And I also don't know, like, even if it is scientific, why does that outweigh? I think the 2NR needs to sit here a lot more, basically. And I think that if the 2NR spends more time unpacking scientific and why I should care about that, like, this debate is more neg for me. But as it is, I just, like, don't really understand how to weigh that against consistent explanation.
Yeah, it seems more defensive in my mind, just because you have not. Your argument is that you are objective, not they are not objective. In strictly this evidence, I know in the broader argument that is what you're saying, but I think Connolly and I both had problems with the former of that, which is they are arbitrary. So this card doesn't really impact that debate that much because we're not voting on your not arbitrary. We're just voting on there's some level of arbitrariness both people achieved. one model is not inherently less arbitrary than the other. Does that make sense?
I guess I do understand that it's defense, but why wouldn't that be defense to the other argument? Because I guess, with the same thing that Adam was saying earlier, since the 2AC explained the complete argument and the 1AR didn't have to explain it fully, I accepted that and I said that that's a card that we read in 2AC, so that was a complete argument. And I said I thought that it's pain and pleasure scientifically evaluable. Why would that not be defense to the nuclear war?
Two things. One is I understood the intended implication of this in the tuner to be that as a reason to prefer your framework. And second, like I don't actually know what I would do with it if it's defense or what that means here, because I'm ultimately trying to decide which ethical framework is better. And so even if like it's not a reason that theirs is like I just don't know. I don't know why that would help me resolve which ethical framework.
It could help you.
I disagree with what Adam said about the claim thing. I don't think just extending the claim, if you like, even if it dropped argument, you still need a warrant. I just think they have it. They say the loss of the other is equivalent to nuclear war because of the loss of subject to. I don't know really what that means. It is a warrant for why the loss of the other is equal to nuclear war. There's not a contestation in the tuner, it's equivalent to that level, so I still give it to them. Again, we talked about why I think it should be better, but I do think they have a warrant in the 1AR, so I disagree with that contextualization.
Okay. Then the question I asked earlier with Sam, like you said that like in this defense, I mean I guess it's just like if we win that we are objective, regardless of whether they are arbitrary, and that pain and pleasure are the only things that are objective, why would that not be the answer to it's unknowable, the risk is so elevated because it is knowable?
I think two things. One,
Good luck,
I need instruction about how this operates on the level of util versus consequentialism. I'm not sure if I should evaluate this as a reason. I think evaluating pain and pleasure for the standards of what is good or bad via util is that, or whether or not this is an argument for why I can't evaluate consequences. So I think I need instruction on that level. I'm tempted to just read it as a util good card, in which case all of their offense felt like consequentialism is bad is a precondition that you have to win before you can get access to it.
I guess I have a question about that too. Like, why does that distinction matter?